So now I'm recording, and also I'm reminding everyone that these lectures are also online sa YouTube. So make sure. So now I'm just making it easier on myself and maybe for everyone. I'm just going to just record these as we're talking, right? It might even be better because we'll be doing some derivations to make sure everyone knows how to do the derivations. Okay, so get ready, prepare your pens and papers. Okay, and think about Cournot and Bertrand again. So we'll talk about what's called the Stackelberg model here. Stackelberg. So named after the guy who invented it, I guess. And it's basically a refinement or an extension of Cournot. And in which case, they just play Cournot, except that you've got two firms, in this case, in our case, identical sila, just to make it easy. And firm one sets the quantity first. Okay. So this means that firm two will optimize against whatever the fixed output Q1 is on the second stage, right? So imagine, like, at night, Q1 decides to bring a bunch of output, Q1 output to the market. And then pagising ni firm 2, lalabas siya and then says, oh, Q1 is in the market already. So for sure, I know it. So it's a little different from yung pinag-usapan natin dati na parang they're both guessing and having expectations. In this case, firm 2, wala na siyang expectation. Diba? Alam niya na Q1 yung output. Alam ni firm 2 na Q1 yung output. So Q2 will optimize against that thing that he already knows. Now, knowing that, ano yung gagawin ni firm 1? Kasi yung issue ni firm 1 is, ano yung Q1 na dadalhin ko, diba? Ano yung output na idadalhin ko at night so that pagdating ni firm 2, yun ang output that firm 2 will maximize against. So what is that firm 1? So I think the key conceptual issue is ito. Okay. Here's the intuition. So firm 1 knows firm 2's reaction function. Okay. So that means, anong sabihin nun? The reaction function comes from the residual demand curve. And alam ni firm 1 yung residual demand curve ni firm 2. Okay. Because si firm 1 ang gagawa ng residual demand ni firm 2, right? Because firm 1 decides to produce Q1, and that will produce a residual demand for firm 2. Okay, so everyone thumbs up if everyone follows that, if everyone's good with what's happening. Alam ni firm 1, right? Yung ang residual demand ni firm 2. And the next step lang si firm 1. Okay, fine. If I am, for example, facing this residual demand that I myself made, by the way, but let's say I am facing this residual demand, I will maximize against that. And that will allow me to guess what firm 2's output is for every Q1 output I give it. Which is quite powerful because that means if I select a Q1, I would know after some introspection kung ano yung Q2. So I can essentially select total output. Okay. And yung constraint ko basically is the firm 2's reaction function, if you will, yung constraint. Because you cannot just set a Q1 and wish that Q2 is 0, for example, that Q2 will stay out. I have to believe that the firm 2 will maximize against its own residual demand function, which I am creating. And if the output of that optimization is not 0, then I will believe that firm 2 will not produce 0. So it's not wishful thinking when it comes to Q1. It's knowledge that if I produce Q1, it will create this amount of residual demand, which will create this amount of Q2, which will create this total output of Q1 plus Q2 and the market price of P. But having said that, a lot of this is in firm 1's driver's seat kasi siya talaga ang magdedetermine kung ano yung total output given the restraint or constraint, I should say, that firm 2's reaction function is based on the residual demand, as we just discussed. So think about this graphically. Graphically, firm 1 is looking for a point on the reaction function of firm 2, where firm 1's profit is the highest. So remember constraint, yung residual demand, sorry, not residual demand, but reaction function. Okay. So R2 is the reaction function. So constraint yung reaction function. So it's just looking for different points along R2 where firm 1's profit is the highest. Okay. So as we will derive, that's firm 1's monopoly output. Note that even though firm 1 has a monopoly output, like we discussed, I think the first time we discussed Corno, kahit na firm 1 has monopoly output, firm 2 will still produce, okay, but not zero, okay. But this time, firm 2 will face Q1 that is fixed. Typo. Firm 1 commits to setting Q1, and firm 2 realizes this and sets Q2 based on where Q1 is on the reaction function. So let's look at this one first. So this is just the usual picture of the two reaction functions. Yeah, this is firm 1's reaction function, and this is firm 2's reaction function. Everything is the same. Costs are the same. Right? They're both facing the same market demand, which is just A minus BQ. Yeah. Okay. So ito yung constraint natin. This is the firm 2's reaction function. And si firm 1 naghahanap ng spot dito. Naghahanap siya ng position that will maximize its own profit, understanding that firm 2 will produce something. It could have chosen this one, right? This one, where Q1 is literally the highest and Q2, firm 2 will produce 0. It could have, right? But given the fact that it's looking to maximize its own product and not necessarily maximize its output, the interesting thing here is hindi niya ginawa ito. Hindi siya nag-produce all the way out here. Okay. So pwede sana. Now, what do you guys remember about this one? I'm pausing here to ask a question. Nga pala, your mics should be good now, right? Let's figure that out. Let's take a moment. Kasi may nagsalita na sa akin dati nung hapon, nung may binago ako. So, okay na sana ito. Can someone test it? May narinig na ako kahapon. Not kahapon, but last week. Sorry, the days are melding. So I hope that means you can use your mic if you want. Right? So my question again is, what is this point here? Do y'all remember this point? Ang laki ng Q1 nito. What do you call that point? Feel free to use your mic so at least we can test it. And everyone can chat with each other already.
Is it the monopoly output, sir?
Ito si Monopoly. Thank you very much for using your mic. Very easy, right? Ito si Monopoly output. Pero ano to? Are you guys seeing this? What I'm doing with my pointer? I hope so. Ito. Tell me if you're seeing it because I've always been doing it. I'm just assuming nakikita niyo. Nakikita niyo ba?
Yes, sir. Visible naman po.
So kung ito si monopoly output nito, we discussed this before in the Corno. Diba? You can depict three situations here: the monopoly output, the Corno output, and the blank output. Yun yung test question eh.
Is it, sir, the perfect competitive output?
Correct. It is a perfectly competitive output. Kayang gawin ni firm 1 yan, syempre. Diba? Kaya niyang gawin. And pag ginawa niya yan, pag ginawa niya yung Q1 equal to the perfectly competitive output, anong gagawin ni firm 2? Stay out siya. Kasi pag pumasok siya, the price will fall below costs na. Does that make sense to everyone? That's an important conceptual insight. Ito, kaya niya sanang gawin. And that would ensure that Q2 would be 0. But syempre, ayaw niyang gawin yun kasi bakit? Perfectly competitive output yun. And bakit niya ayaw yun? Just to be sure, I just want to know, bakit niya ayaw yun? Bakit ayaw ni Q1 yun? Or ni firm 1? This is like foundations. If you are someone with market power, would you choose to produce at the perfectly competitive level? Why? Why or why not? Remember,
Sir,
like I
there's
said,
no profit in a
paulit-ulit na tayo.
No profit in perfect competition po.
Yes,
If the
there's
price
no
is just
profit.
equal to the cost.
So mabuti pa siya na nandito siya. 'Di ba? Kahit na may kalaban, siguradong meron kang profit. As opposed to producing here, wala kang kalaban, wala ka rin profit. 'Di ba? These are all the themes that we've been talking about for a couple of months now. And so dapat mabilis nang lalabas yan. Kasi tatlong situation lang naman. Monopoly, core no, or perfect competition. Okay. And definitely, if it's a choice between some situation where it's a monopoly output and the other guy produces, or perfectly competitive output, gugustuhin mo pa rin yung mas konti yung output. Because that means your profits are positive. Your prices are above your marginal costs. Or your average costs in this case. Okay, so now let's figure this out. Sabi natin that Q1, knowing that it will choose a situation or a spot along this line, it will produce this one, Q1 monopoly. So that's why the Stackelberg equilibrium is A minus C over 2B. And then if you will just do the math here, Q2 is A minus C over 4B. Okay. I have a question. How will you get Q2 star? Knowing Q1, let's say na-solve mo na siya. Alam mo na si Q1 star and say, I'm convinced it's the monopoly output. Q1 is monopoly output. How would you know Q2 star? Just in words.
So you plug in Q1 star to the response function of Q2.
Tama. Which is ito. Ito, nakasulat na siya. So yung Q1 star, sasaksak mo lang siya dito. And then it's all gonna be a function of A, C, and B. And then it will turn out to be like this. All right, so the first question then is, since alam na natin kung paano gawin yan, the only remaining thing is how do you get this one? Right? How do you get that one? How do you get Q1 star? So yung sagot dyan is, mathematically, you will take this, which is the reaction function, as a constraint. So ipapasok mo siya dun sa profit max ni firm 1. So let's write that down right now. And ano ba tayo? Insert equation tayo. Right? So this is profit of 1. And may laman yan. We'll skip it. Okay? So this is just gonna be A, well, gayahin natin to. A minus B Q1, remember? Minus B, sorry, Q2. And then all of this times what? Q1, then minus C, tapos Q1. So that is the profit for firm 1. But si firm 1 will take this as a constraint. So eto, sasaksak ko siya dito. Because you already know that when you produce Q1, Q2 is given exactly by this. Therefore, Q2 is already a thing that you know. And it's a function of whatever Q1 is. So this one, isasaksak mo siya dito. Oops. Equals, I'm just gonna literally plug it in. Ooh. I want the equation again. When you start doing equations, you'll always want to use it, even though it's sort of irritating. So ito, papasok natin. Ito. This is A minus C, and this is 2B. And then this is minus Q1. Well, let's do fractions again. And this is 2. And then again, all of this will be multiplied by Q1 minus CQ. That's what we meant by constraint, right? Because literally, if I say Q1 is 10, I know what Q2 is. And it's based on this one. And this is based on the residual demand level. That's stuff we talked about before. So given all of that, isasaksak mo na lang siya. And what do you notice here? Nawala si Q2 because Q2 is just a function of Q1. And everything is just a function of Q1. So if you were, what's the next step here, guys? What should you do at this point? Siguro, ayusin muna natin, diba? So, eto, ano mangyayari doon? This is very interesting. A minus B, again, I am so interested in doing this. A minus B Q1. And then this one, the first one will become what? What is minus B times A over 2B? It's still going to be a fraction. Ito lang, you just distribute this B to this first term, which is just the A, not even the C, just the A. It's best to really simplify. A over 2 kasi mawawala yung B. Diba? A over 2. And then itong minus B i-distribute mo dun sa minus C. So since minus times minus is positive, it's positive. Sorry. Again, nauusi ako. And then fraction ulit. Ano to? C over 2. Diba? Kasi yung B mawawala rin. Same Same. And then yung minus b, i-distribute mo siya dito. Minus times minus, that's a what? That's a positive. So you're going to do a fraction again. And, sorry. You're going to do a fraction again. And it's a fraction. Q1. And then what's the denominator? Well, it's still 2. But now you're multiplying it by b. Okay. And then, since everything is distributed, well, you should multiply that by Q1. Don't forget that, right? Kasi inayos mo lang yung gitna. Minus C Q1. Yeah. So I guess that's the real first step. Ayusin mo muna. And then the A will become something. The C, this will have a C. That's the interesting part, right? Your price term will have a C. Because this is just the price, remember? This is just price times quantity minus marginal cost times quantity. Your price will have C in it. Good. You can further simplify this. And let's just do that. Into. So what happens to the A? Okay. A and then A minus 2. What's that? Yeah, it's just A minus 2. Good. Nauusi ako. Kayo rin, nauusi rin kayo dyan. Fraction equation. And then yung C, ano siya? Wala naman kasi wala ka naman mama-minus dun. So it's still gonna be plus C over 2, which you can actually simplify to A plus C over 2. But what happens most importantly to this Q1? So here you have a minus B Q1, and then here you have a positive Q1 B over 2. What happens to that? It's gonna be a minus or plus? There you go. Minus B cubed. Kasi minus 1 plus 1/2 is just minus 1/2. Minus, fraction ulit, Q1 over 2 times B. So lahat na ayos na natin sa price term. Q1 minus C Q1. So literally, you could jump from here to here. Then that's fine. So ito na si price term, right? So the price is some number here. So even if your Q1 is 0, what's interesting here is that even if Q1 is 0, the price here is still some number. Okay. That's cool because for sure, gagawa output si firm 2, right? Even if you decide to go out, firm 2 will do something. Okay, that's the implication here. Kaya may C2 dito. So, I think we don't need to actually do the math. But first, just tell me what's the next step. What will you do? Now that you've simplified it. Correct. This time, you just get the first derivative. Pwede rin, yung sagot nyo is just do the MR is equal to MC formula, right? You can now do it here because you just get what? Ano ulit yung MR natin? if this is your indirect, what do you call this? Indirect? Yeah, indirect demand curve. How would you get the MR of this? The MR of your indirect demand curve is blank the slope of your indirect demand curve. What is blank? Twice. So you just multiply this by twice. 1/2 times 2 is just 1. So mawawala lang yung 2. Diba? So this is your MR already, but Q1 minus B. Sorry, Q1B. Wala na yung 2 equals C. Diba? So I'll leave that up to you. You guys can do it. Diba? You can either get the derivative, which is very basic, or we can do the usual formula, which is once you have it in this form, indirect demand, right? Wala na yung Q2, indirect demand na lang siya. You just get twice the slope and then set it equal to C, which is your marginal cost. That will get you this one. Okay. 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 So nandito na tayo, and then your Stackelberg equilibrium is the following. Q1 star is this. Q2 star is this. And what is this? It's the sum of these two things. Right? 1/2 plus 1/4 is 3/4. Diba? Okay. So nakasulat rin yan dito. This dot here, that's the Cournot equilibrium. And this here is the Stackelberg. Okay. So what do we know if the output of Stackelberg is higher? So first, nakikita nyo rito, that's why I drew the red lines, because you can see that combinations of these outputs here is equivalent to Cournot, right? So this is Cournot level. And then this one, this red line is clearly above that. So mas mataas yung Stackelberg. So pag mas mataas yung output ng Stackelberg, ano ang masasabi natin sa price? Chat. Lower price. So Stackelberg leadership model will generate a lower price than Cournot. Okay. And then maybe you should try to do what are the profits for firm 1 and firm 2 under Stackelberg versus Cournot. And the key question here is, if firm 1 is the Stackelberg leader, does firm 1 benefit from being the Stackelberg leader relative to not being the Stackelberg leader and just having the regular kernel? Okay. So that's something you should try to do at home after this. Okay, ngayon, mag-price leadership tayo. Okay. Under the usual Bertrand, the non-differentiated Bertrand. Okay. So under the non-differentiated Bertrand, so now firm 2 is following firm 1's price P1. So it's the same concept of leadership, but instead now it's price leadership. So firm 1 at night will set the price to be P1, then P2 can follow. In the morning when it gets there. So price leadership na ito. Now, from firm 2's point of view, pagpunta nila sa market, kita na nila yung price ni P1. Then they can choose to, so kita na nila yun with certainty, right? Kasi nag-declare na si leader na yun yung price. So firm 2's point of view is that they can undercut P1. Okay? So what happens again if they undercut under the Bertrand? What happens when firm 2 undercuts? what will firm 2 get and what will firm 1 get? Okay, what does the chat say? Right. So the firm that undercuts will get the demand, right? At that price, of course. Not all the demand literally, but the demand at that price. Which is kung mababa yung price na ginamit nilang pang undercut, they'll get more demand, right? As you know, price and quantity demand is negatively related. So firm 2 will get to sell something, right? And get that demand at that price. What happens to firm 1? May sagot ba dito? Yeah, so sabi ni Lilan, firm 1, the firm with the higher price gets to sell nothing. So ayaw nyo yun. Mas gusto mong makabenta ka ng something rather than nothing, as long as your price happens to be higher than your cost. So, kawawa yung leader dito. Kasi whenever the leader says 10, everyone will like to undercut and grab the market, right? As long as everyone's prices are above C. So, firm 2 undercuts P1 if P1 is greater than C. And if P1 comes in immediately with a price that's equal to its cost, firm 2 matches, assuming they have the same cost, they just match, and it would not want to undercut, sell to all, but each unit is at a loss, right? So this assumes that C is the same. Again, the usual Bertrand model that we talked about last time. Okay, so the Nash equilibrium here is the same as the usual Nash equilibrium. In fact, it probably is quicker, because firm 1, as the leader, will realize immediately that firm 2 will simply undercut. And firm, it knows that with certainty. And if that's what happened, then all of the demand at that price will go to firm 2. So firm 1 will immediately, as the leader, will set the price equal to marginal cost. So that's why I did the Nash equilibrium here is dot. It's the same as the one before. Now let's talk about price leadership. Okay, so remember, this is just the spatially differentiated price leadership model. Okay, where T happens to be like the cost of not consuming, the one that's good for you, that you prefer, right? And the further away it is, okay, the more you will pay, and that's the T. So these are just the reaction functions. Firm 1, reaction function, and firm 2, reaction function. Ito siya in math, ito siya in math. So the differentiated Bertrand equilibrium is the intersection of the two, which is just C plus E over 2. Okay. So the question here is, how do you get this one? Under this situation, it's the same. Firm 1 will choose dito sa R2. Okay. Choose a position on R2 where its profits are higher. And here it will produce at this level. Well, it will choose a price at this level. And that's the P1. Okay, so how would we do this mathematically? It's the same concept as earlier. Okay, so I'm just going to now insert. There. Beep, beep. Tapos maglalagay tayo ng equation. Text box. And then we will insert this equation. Instead, we will do demand 1, which is something dot. Again, tignan mo yung earlier slides to know what this is. And this is just P2 minus P1 plus tau divided by 2 tau times n. Okay, can someone tell me what this is again? This is just something we learned in the differentiated Bertrand. Okay, there's a chat. Exactly. That is firm one's demand function. Pag tumaas yung price ni firm one, anong mangyayari sa demand? Bababa. Diba? So this is just your demand function. Ngayon, ang sinabi natin is it will face a constraint. Remember? And the constraint is P2. Again, once you start doing equation editor, you don't want to go back. P2, which is a function of P1, is fraction. What's this guy again? P1 plus C plus tau divided by 2. So ano naman to? Ano to? Yeah, that's the reaction function of firm 2. Pag nakita niya na yung price niya is P1, then he will set a P2 equal to this thing, whatever this is. So, like we discussed earlier, si firm 1 yung leader. And if it sets P1 equals to some number P1, then it knows that firm 2 will just set its own price based on this one. So, ito, ilalagay mo lang siya ulit dito. Right? Because your demand here, you'll see that it's a function of P2 and P1. But in this case, because you're the leader, see P2 is actually just really P1. Because firm 2 is just going to follow. Right? So in this case, anong gagawin natin dyan? So, yung nangyari, sinaksak lang natin itong reaction function doon. I'm just gonna change rooms. Give me a second. Let's resume. Once you have the indirect demand function here as derived from above, inserting the reaction function of firm 2, you will get an indirect reaction function that incorporates that. Okay. And the indirect demand function will have C. Essentially for the same reasons that in in Cournot may C din doon. It's because this represents the action of the other guy. Okay, the reaction of the other guy. So once you have the indirect demand function, what's next? How will you get the optimal P1? Well, you can write out the profit function, which is just this P1 times Q1 minus C, which is the marginal cost. Okay. And then marginal cost, and then Q1, right? So notice that you won't really use tau as your part of your marginal cost, because in this case, it's the consumer who will go to you. Okay, so you can do that. Or you can do, wait, let me check. Or you can just do MC is equal to MR, which is just twice the slope of this times equals marginal cost. I'm just gonna write here what this is. This is the and then all you have to do is max profit or find MR is equal to MC. And that will give you a quantity, Q1 star, which is equal to something. And that Q1 star is now equal to 3n/8. Okay, since Q1 star is 3n/8, how would you know what P1 star is? How would you know what P1 star is? Exactly. You use the indirect demand function and you just plug in Q1 here. That's 3n over 8. And then you will get a price of, well, nasulat na rito. Well, you will get this price. Okay? So, babalik muna tayo rito. You can solve it and then you can get this price. And then you will be able to get this price. How will you get this price? Price of 2. Once you have P1 star. It's probably worth writing it down. E1 star by inserting into the inverse demand. And that will give you a P1 star equals C plus, is that one again? 3 T over 2. So once you have this, how do you get P2 star? Exactly. Good. You plug it into your constraint, which is the firm 2's reaction function. Remember, we said that once you know P1, and we now know P1, you know what P2 is based on this. And that will give you P2 equals 5T over 4. Okay, so first question. Ano ang nangyari sa mga presyo under price leadership? Nandito sa left, yung Bertrand without price leadership. Nandito sa right, yung prices under price leadership. Ano nangyari? Correct, different prices. Ano pang masasabi mo dyan? Hindi lang sila different. How is it different? Mas mataas. Di ba? Okay. Mas mataas yung mga presyo nila. No? Well, first, i-compare nyo muna yan dito sa Bertrand. Okay? Ano nangyari sa prices under leadership versus the usual Bertrand? Anong mas mataas? Huwag nyo muna i-ano yung leader versus follower. Ano yung mas mataas? Yung price Bertrand leadership? Yun. Prices are higher. Right? Everyone's good on that, right? Because look, sa C pa lang, dito C over 2, dito C, diba? Dito kalahati yung C, dito buong C, right? And not just that, dito yung T, kalahati rin ng T. Ito ba kalahati ng T? Is 3 over 2 bigger than 1 or greater than 1? It's greater than 1. So, ano ang sagot? Mas mataas ang presyo under price leadership kesa the usual Bertrand. Okay? That's 1. 2, whose prices are higher? The answer here is either both of them or just one of them. What's the answer? Whose prices are higher? Whose prices are higher?
I guess, sir, both prices increased, but yung price of the leader is
Oh
greater than
wait,
the price of...
both prices are higher, right? Tama.
Yes, sir.
So P1 star is higher than the old P1 star, and the new P2 star is higher than the old P2 star. So that just says what we were talking about earlier about yung strategic complements. Na pag nagtaas yung isang presyo, yung firm ng isa, which we said nagtaasan nga yung isa at least one of them tumaas, yung isa tataas din. Okay. So that's a result of the fact that this is a strategic complement as opposed to strategic substitute. Pag nagtaas ng presyo yung isa, that will allow the other firms to also raise prices. Okay, so that's one of the results of this, right? Okay. So kita niyo na yung difference. Is that the difference nga pala between the Stackelberg and this one? Ano nangyari sa Stackelberg? Tumaas ang pressure, bumaba? Bumaba. Diba? Because may substitution na nangyari. May tumaas na output para may bumabang output. Overall, tumaas yung output and bumaba yung presyo under Stackelberg. Dito, dahil nagtaas ng presyo yung isa tataas din. And therefore, the average price in the industry or the market goes up. Okay. And that is a reflection of yung strategic complements versus strategic substitutes. So, ibang-iba. Diba? Pag price competition or quantity competition. And let's talk about leaders versus followers. The leader will go up to C plus 3 tau over 2. And then the follower will go up also. But I think someone already said, check ko lang sa chat. P1 star is greater than P2 star. So therefore, the price leader has higher prices. Sabi ni Leland, sabi ni Jacob. Okay. So that makes sense as well. Pag nag-set ng price under Bertrand, for example, ano yung gagawin ng follower? Ano yung gagawin ng follower? Pag nag-set ng price P1 at some level P1, si leader, anong gagawin ni follower? Sasabayan ba niya o hindi? Undercut. So that should also be seen here. And in fact, we see it. P1 has this price, and then P2, tataas rin, pero hindi ganun kataas. It will still undercut. But because strategic complements sila, they don't have to lower their price too much or even lower their price from the old equilibrium. They can just follow, but not follow all the way. And they will have more demand than before. Okay. So in a simultaneous game, each firm's profit is n tau over 2. In leadership, both firms profit more, but the follower profits relatively more. Firm 1 gets that, and firm 2 gets that. Right? From firm 2's point of view, by the time firm 1 sets P1, it's irreversible. So set na sa P1, and firm 2 will just set a price lower than that and undercut. So I have here as a final bullet is something that's interesting. Okay. And let's talk about yung profits ng leader under both Stackelberg and Bertrand price leadership. Okay. So under this one, I am about to say that firm 1's actions here are credible because firm 1 will in fact play that value because it will give it higher profits than under any value along firm 2's reaction function. Okay. So bumalik tayo dito. Ito yung conceptual point. Ito si firm 2's reaction function. And ang sinabi natin, si firm 1 will choose a point along this line. Question, did it choose the original Bertrand equilibrium? Yes or no? No. I have a second question. Could it have in fact chosen the original Bertrand equilibrium? Yes or no? I mean, even if we know that it didn't, but could it have chosen that? Was that in its menu of possibilities? It's in budget set, if you want to think about it in consumer terms. Was firm one able to choose that equilibrium if it wanted to? What's the answer? The answer is yes, it can. Kasi look, it can choose to choose any point here along R2. Is the old equilibrium along R2? Yes or no? Siyempre, it is along R2 kasi yun nga yung, that's how we got the old equilibrium. It's the intersection of both R1 and R2. Pero ngayon, dahil leader na si firm 1, it can choose not just the intersection, but any point along R2 and R1. And the answer is, did it choose the original Bertrand differentiated equilibrium? Yes or no? The answer is no. And it chose this one because this gives that firm, the leader's firm, higher profits. Except that under price leadership, mas mataas yung follower. So the follower benefits more, right? Because of the strategic complementarity of this and the fact that there's some undercutting happening. So tumataas yung market share ni firm 2. In fact, we can see the same thing here in Stackelberg, right? I have a question. Under Stackelberg, is the old Cournot-Nash equilibrium achievable? Remember, firm 1 is choosing along this R2. Could it have chosen this old one? Is the old one along R2? Yes, sabi ni Jacob. So if it could have chosen any point here, and sabi natin, could have chosen this, it chose not to. It could have chosen this, chose not to. It chose this. Therefore, what do we know about the profits of Stackelberg leader versus what the leader would have had in profits under the old equilibrium? What do we know? Do we know if its profits are higher or lower? Or we don't know? Okay, so we know the profits are higher because it could have chosen this, but chose to do this instead. So I invite you to calculate the Stackelberg profits. It should be that mas mataas ang profits dito versus dito for the leader. Now, what about the follower? Ano ang mangyayari sa output ng follower dito, guys? Dahil substitutes nga siya, we know that Q1 goes up. But what about Q2? Does Q2 go up as well or go down? Diba? Alam natin na under strategic complement sa price, both prices go up. But under strategic substitutes, what happens? The quantity of firm 2 goes up or down?
goes down. Okay? So, think about firm 2. Ano kaya ang profits ni firm 2? The quantity itself go down. The price, what happens to the price? Goes down. What happens to the profit of firm 2? Without even computing for it. Bababa. Kasi bababa yung binenta niya, bababa rin yung presyo. So, bababa yung revenue niya. Siguradong bababa. Right? So, kita niyo yung differences. May differences between the Cournot and the Cournot first action or first mover or leadership, which is Stackelberg, and the Bertrand differentiated leadership, which we just discussed. Okay. Kung ano ang mangyayari sa follower vis-a-vis the two situations, and ano yung mangyayari sa leader. The leader, for sure, its profits go up relative to the old equilibrium. Okay. But depending on whether it's price competition or quantity competition, the profits for the follower, it depends. Okay. It also depends what happens on the relative profits of the follower versus the leader. And nakita na natin under Bertrand, differentiated Bertrand leadership, mas tataas ang profits ni follower because of undercutting. But here, in Stackelberg, mas mataas sa profits ni leader, and in fact, bababa pa ang profits ni follower, Stackelberg follower. And it's all because of this credibility thing, right? These points here are chosen to maximize the profits of the one choosing. So pag sinabi ni firm 1, ito ang gusto ko, yan talaga ang gusto niya. Yan talaga ang gusto niya, hindi niya gusto to. So hindi siya mali, diba? It could have chosen anything there. It will choose this, then it knows that given firm 2 follows its reaction function, this will maximize its own profits amongst all of the choices here. So that's, well, we'll do the last slide now, and we'll just introduce the next set of slides. Very easy. So we'll do some game theory, very basic game theory next week for about 20 minutes. But this is about the credibility of threats. The oligopoly models have different equilibria because of the credibility of their first period actions, right? So to understand the credibility of the actions, the fact that this action, when I say my first period output is Q1, and when I say my first period output is P1, then that's credible in the sense that I chose this because this in fact maximizes my profits, given that I know what you will do in the future. Okay. So that creates credible threats. Okay. Because I know what will happen in the future. Okay. So let's just spend a couple of minutes just doing the outline here. So we'll do basic dynamic games under game theory, of which si Stackelberg and si Bertrand differentiated, or Bertrand generally leadership models, price leadership models, are examples. Okay. And particular, these are examples of credible threats. No? Okay. So dynamic games, magba-backward induction tayo, extensive form. So we'll do some really simple dynamic games here. A dynamic game here is basically a game of entry in industrial organization. So we will restrict ourselves to games of entry or exit. So in that sense, in the sense of the Stackelberg, for example, or Bertrand price leadership, we are thinking about actions that I will do, and then maybe those actions that I will do today will influence your actions in the future such that you won't even want to enter. Okay. So that's why it's called a dynamic game. It will also involve something called entry into the industry. Okay. So we will close with some really basic stuff on predatory conduct and limit pricing. and a model of entry deterrence, which is exactly what we said earlier. If there a way for me to set my output or to set my price such that ayaw mo nang pumasok, right? And we won't even go into capacity expansion, the Dixit model, and then preemption. We'll do a really, really basic one. Under Cournot, we already know some of the answers to this, actually. If firm 1 is the leader, and if firm 1 produces the perfectly competitive output, firm 2 will enter or not? Ano ang Q2? Q2 will be 0. So if I want Q2 to not enter, right, then I have to increase the output and lower the price by so much such that I won't even have a price. So that's the sense in which entry deterrence is not credible, because I know that if you increase your quantity today and lower the price of the market today, when I in fact enter, you probably will want to lower your industry output. Hindi siya credible yung threat mo to keep the prices low in the future after I enter. And in fact, even today, you probably won't even do it because your profits will be 0, like we just discussed. Okay. And then starting next week, we will just do Nash equilibria for dynamic games. And then after this, we will do cartel. Some basic stuff on cartel. All right. I guess I'll see you guys next week.